After sketching the basic outline of the cat portrait, I can start with imprimatur. I mix a neutral color using Van Dyke, Ochre and Ultramarine. I also add some white and just a touch of Oxide Red. I start by referencing the cat's local color. Since this color occupies the main part of the painting, I describe it as a warm gray shade, leaning towards brown. With a large brush, I apply a thin layer of paint generously diluted with solvent, or if the format is too large, I might even use a sponge. Next, I take a paper towel and very carefully remove any excess paint so as not to smudge the pencil drawing. Alternatively, I can leave everything as it is and let the work dry for 15 or maybe 20 minutes. The imprimatur significantly eases further work, especially when I switch to finding the right color and tone. I won't be distracted by the white canvas, making colors appear darker than they actually are. Well, let's start with the first stage. I need to find the darkest and the lightest areas in the painting. In this case, the darkest are the outlines of the eyes and the black details of the toy, also the shadows under it. I take a small brush and mix the darkest color to outline the eyes. By the way, it's important that my darkest mix isn't pure black paint, but a blend of ultramarine and alizarin, since neither black paint nor white paint is a color. I outline the eyes so I don't lose their form during the work. Part of the portrait, like the eyes and nose, are crucial for likeness, so they need to be clearly defined. Everything else can be marked roughly, using a wider brush to blur the edges and not fearing to go beyond the outline. Now I'm mixing the eye color. At this stage, the main goal is to get the tone right. If I make any mistakes in the color, it won't be critical. Everything can be fixed in the following stage of work. By the way, I intentionally make the underpainting slightly warmer than the color in the photo. The next layers of the painting will match that we see. Also, it's better to work cool over warm than the other way around. Through the final cool layer of paint, the warm underpainting will subtly show through, adding complexity to the color. Now I want to create the cast shadow from the cat's head onto the toy. I take Cadmium Red, Alizarine, a bit of Oxide Red and Ultramarine. I create a dark pinkish blue mix. Then I mark the thin stripe of shadow. I always squint to compare the tonal relationships. When I put down a stroke of color, I try to compare it not only with the neighboring spot but also with the darkest and lightest areas in the painting. Squinting is crucial. It helps us to see the scene in general, without getting caught up in details. However, it's important to remember that while squinting, we are comparing one tone to another, determining what's lighter and what's darker. But to see color correctly, we must look with our eyes wide open, just like in real life. The key is not to overdo it, or else everyone around will think you are extremely impressed by the object you are depicting. To simultaneously establish tonal and color relationships, you can try looking at the object in a slightly blurred way. Try to practice this, it's genuinely interesting and beneficial. Well, I continue working on the dark part of the toy. This section of the flamingo is still in the shadow, but since the shadow isn't too deep, I make the color brighter. Overall, I like it when there is vibrant accent in a painting, like a toy, a collar or a tag. These bright details make the composition more intriguing and catch the viewer's attention. So, if possible, it's better to choose reference photos that have such colorful accents. I mark the shadow above the nose. Imagine that, like sculptors, we are building the shape of the head with firm, confident strokes, defining clear planes. At this stage, I don't even think about the edges of the strokes. Whether it'll be sharpened or better blended, it doesn't matter right now. After this initial stage, the painting might even look like a mosaic, where you can clearly separate one stroke from another. Adding a bit of orange paint to make the basic mix warmer and lighter. I slowly analyze the shape of the cat's head and move on. Each new brush stroke differs from its neighbor both in color and tone. It's these seemingly subtle nuances that ultimately create all the beauty and magic of painting. Mixing a cool grey color, I make the lower part of the portrait. I leave two light patches on the cheeks where the light hits. I'll add to them when I work on the brightest part of the portrait. With the cool grey color, I lay down the plane of the nose. I soften this plane with a few warm strokes. Since the canvas size is just 15 by 15 cm, my main brush is quite small. But this size is sufficient to apply small strokes and avoid getting caught up in details. I'd say it's better to use a slightly larger brush than you think you need. It'll prevent you from getting tempted to start detailing fur, highlights, whiskers, and so on. I don't use a lot of solvent, but at the same time I don't apply to paint too thickly. One of the rules of painting is to start with a thin layer of paint, which adheres to the gesso, and then apply a thick one, and then another thin one. Otherwise, the longevity of our painting will be significantly reduced. Now I mix a light grey color. Our light source is cool, so the cat's fur in the light will also be cool. I complete the right side of the cat's portrait. Then I make this color slightly warmer and create transitional planes between the nose and the cheek. I mark the warm pink reflex from the toy. And now nose, which will be even lighter because it's facing the light source. It's lighter and a bit warmer. When we paint light, we can use more paint and make thicker strokes. Let's move on to the paws. First I mark the darkest areas where the claws are and then add shadows under the paws. The bottom of the paw will be slightly warmer since it receives a reflection from the warm background. Finally, I finish detailing the cat's back. I make a slightly lighter color and paint the top surface of the paw. It needs to be a bit greener. And with broad strokes, I finish this area. I mix a light background color, which is the brightest area in the painting. I add a touch of pink to match the overall color scheme of the portrait. It's essential to remember that the background isn't separate. Sometimes artists paint the portrait separately and then add the background, making it look like the portrait is cut out. That's not the right approach. As I work towards the top of the painting, I change the background color to a warmer tone while maintaining its brightness. Carefully, I outline the contour of the cat's muzzle, head and ears. Some areas have sharp edges, while others are gently smoothed out. This variety in edges, color and texture makes the painting interesting for the viewer. It's important to remember that the background is a crucial part of the overall painting. I always take my time to think about how it should look. Sometimes it's tough and takes a lot of effort. I often make several sketches before starting the painting. But the background can be even more important than the portrait itself. With the portrait, we just need to paint what we see in the photo. But with the background, we have to carefully plan and choose the best option. And I am applying a base coat for the highlight. The same on the other side, but not entirely identical to the previous one. Even the shape of the strokes varies slightly, the highlight on the eye in shadow will be smaller.